Hey, what's up guys? So when I was teaching martial arts and training fighters, I always understood that a lot of the power that we generate, whether it's through a punch, whether it's through a kick, has to do with our relationship with the ground, right? That's why when I teach boxing, I'm always explaining the stance first, how your feet are positioned, your position for each different type of punch or different kick or whatever it is you're trying to do. It's so important, right? Because a lot of the power comes from the ground when you throw a punch. So now that I've transitioned into golf, what I love about that is that we can go even deeper into some of that science because we have technology to measure the forces that are being applied between our feet and the ground to create the power in our golf swing. So thanks to the Swing Catalyst technology, which is a force plate on which you stand, which allows us to measure, as you can see here, the 3 different types of forces that are involved in a golf swing. So I'm going to explain this very quickly. The first force you have is your horizontal force. So the horizontal force is the force that you create laterally by really pushing off that back foot, right? So think pitcher throwing a ball in baseball. That force that they get when they're pushing off the mound, that would be your horizontal force, your lateral force going toward your target. The second force is torque. So torque is the force that's created through the rotation. And though we see a lot of the rotation in the hip and the upper body, in the hips and the upper body, that force is actually being generated by our feet and that motion of almost twisting toward the target. So though it doesn't look this way in a golf swing, what we're actually trying to do, because the ground is preventing us from doing it, the friction between the ground and the feet is what's preventing this from happening. But think that your feet are kind of doing that, right? So you have one foot turning toward the target inward, and the other one is turning toward the target outward. So if you didn't have the ground and the friction happening there, what would happen is your feet would basically do that as you're swinging the golf club. And then the third force is your vertical force. So the vertical force comes in at the end, and this is that jumping force, right? So that's mostly, I'd say, on that front leg, because thanks to, again, this technology, we can also see how much weight is on each foot, depending on the part of the swing we're at. And when you get to impact, most people have roughly 70% of their weight or even 80% of their weight on that front leg. So when they're pushing off that front leg, that's your vertical force. That's almost like a jumping force, okay? So you have horizontal, you have torque, and you have vertical. And today what I wanted to do was present you with 3 different exercises that we can include in our workouts, in our physical activation or physical preparation for golf, in order to get better control of those forces and maybe improve some of the muscles that are involved in generating those forces. So this first exercise is called skaters, or at least that's what I call it. It's an exercise I've been doing for many, many, many years. I love this exercise, really, really good for that horizontal lateral movement, but also a little bit of the jumping vertical force, all right? So think speed skating in the Olympics. So when you watch a speed skater go, they're taking these super long strides and you see their arms going back and forth. And that's kind of the movement we're trying to recreate, except that we're not moving forward, we're staying on a straight line. So you're gonna get into your golf stance or a little bit wider, and you're just gonna push off one foot to one side and then push off and go to the other side. Now, version 1, you can just go nice and slow, just like I'm doing right now. Always be careful when you're doing any type of lateral movement. What you really need to protect are your knees, okay? Because you are going to be putting pressure on the knee joint as well as the hips a little bit. So always be careful. If there's any pain, stop. But if you feel like you're good for this, you can start really, really slow and just focusing on that push and push and push, okay? So that would be version 1. Version 2, same thing. We're just going to speed it up a little bit. So instead of going really, really slowly, I'm going to make it a little more dynamic. But notice I'm bringing both feet on the ground after each jump. Okay, so I push and I land, I push and I land. Be really careful when you land that your knees are always bent. That gives you much better control of the movement. And it also helps to take some of that impact, to absorb some of the impact created by the jump. And then version 3 is a much more dynamic, borderline cardio training, where you're going to keep one foot up in the air and you're really going to jump from side to side. So this one, notice that this back foot never hits the ground. So this is going to really help to work control, balance, and if I do this long enough, try to do about 30 seconds of these, you're going to start to get out of breath, so that gives you a little bit of cardio training. Okay, so that's exercise number 1, skaters, 3 different versions. Really good to work on your horizontal force with a little bit of the vertical force involved too. All right, so exercise number 2. Now this one is important to understand that although those forces work in a specific sequence in our golf swing, that doesn't mean that we have to repeat that exact sequence with every single exercise we do. Sometimes we just exercise to get stronger, even though it doesn't represent the exact sequencing of a golf swing. Okay, so please keep that in mind. So remember before I talked about how when we apply torque with our feet, it's almost like our feet are twisting toward the target, or if we're balancing both sides of the body, we're gonna work on both sides. So I was thinking, what if we combine that kind of twisting motion with a squat? So it would look like this. So I squat down, as I come up, I twist. Squat down and twist. Squat down and twist. And then I was showing this to my coach and he recommended, what if you keep your upper body pointed toward the front and only the hips turn toward the target or turn toward the side? And what that does is it helps us to dissociate the lower and upper body, which is a really important part of the golf swing because this part will start to turn toward the target before the upper body does. So there's a dissociation between the bottom and top part of the body, so we can work on that with this exercise as well. Okay, so remember we're going down in a squat. As soon as you come up, twist, come back to your original squat position, come down, twist, down, twist, down, twist. Okay? Now, if you want to get a little more dynamic, you could almost jump after, instead of twisting with your feet on the ground, you could do it as a jump squat. So it would look like this. Here, jump. Here, jump. Okay, so this one's way more dynamic. Please make sure that you're capable of doing that. You're not hurting yourself. But again, you would squat, jump and twist, come back. Squat, jump and twist, come back. So again, it's not the exact same movements we would use in the golf swing, but a lot of these movements are going to help to reinforce the muscles that you need to generate the power in your golf swing, and it really helps with body control, which is what I really like as well. So again, one more time, you're coming down, twist, down, and twist. Version number 2 is you're adding the jump, and the whole time, try to keep your chest pointed as forward as possible. All right, and exercise number 3 is a side lunge. Okay, this one I'm not taking credit for. Honestly, don't remember. I did a bunch of research on different exercises to help with the ground forces for golf. This one came up, but I added a little twist, okay? So I'm gonna give you 2 versions here. Version 1 is a very controlled side lunge. So side lunge means I'm stepping to the side, and then I'm basically squatting on one leg as this leg stays nice and straight, and then I'm gonna come back to my original position. I'm gonna squat down, and then I push off, right? So I'm getting a little bit of vertical and a little bit of horizontal at the same time because I'm going diagonally. But I would say it feels more like I'm working that horizontal force by pushing off that back foot. So I'll do, let's say, 10 on this side, and then obviously you want to do both sides, pushing off, here, pushing off. Okay, so that's version number 1. Version number 2, we're gonna add a balance element, which means I'm gonna not let my foot touch the ground when I come back off my squat, okay? So notice the foot that I'm squatting on is not gonna touch the ground when I bring it back. So I squat, and then I leave it here in the air, and then I just drop. So what's happening now is I'm working this leg because it's involved in staying balanced, while the other leg is pushing off when it lands. And then obviously I want to do both sides. So now I'm going to go this way, squat down, don't let this foot touch the ground. Squat down, don't let this foot touch the ground. All right, so that's exercise number 3, which is a side lunge or a side squat. One version where we let our feet come together, and another version where we keep this foot hovering, so there's a little more of a kind of a dynamic feel to it. All right, guys, so there are 3 exercises that you can try to help improve your ground forces for golf. If you have any questions or comments, would love to hear from you. Please subscribe to the channel, really helps me out. Have an amazing day. Peace.